This is SME On Point. My name is Diabo Seto. So running a business is not only about sales. The brand that you build for your business is quite imperative. Ideally, you want to build a memorable and most loved brand for your business. This is what will give you massive growth and also raving fans. Today's masterclass is with Pat Mahlangu, the founder of Pat on Brands. He will take us through how to build a reputable brand for your small business and have a unique brand identity. But firstly, let's see if we can find him on Zoom. Pat on Brands. The guest is not here yet. But as I have been saying that this January we have been doing all these masterclasses. We started with, how to get ahead in starting a business. And then the following week we looked at retail, how you can get your brands on the retail shelves. This was last week where we talked about that. And today we thought we should help you along with building a brand for your business that is quite reputable. As I said earlier on, building a brand is quite important. I have invited Pat Mahlangu of Pat on Brands to take us through a 10-minute masterclass. I hope that you're sitting down and you're taking down notes, because this is quite important and this is going to be something that will be quite useful for your business going forward. Pat, are you on the line? Have you joined us?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Today you are a masterclass leader on how to build a reputable brand for your small business. Firstly, let's talk about Pat on Brands. What do you guys do?
So Pat on Brands is an online media platform that focuses on marketing and branding. So if you want to know about what's happening in the world of brands, Pat on Brands is the platform that you need to be looking out for. We are available electronically via our website, www.patonbrands.com. And also we are very much active on social media across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn as Pat on Brands.
Right. Let's talk about the common mistakes that you have seen that small businesses do that impact negatively on their brands.
First and foremost, the biggest mistake that many SMEs make is that they tend to think that marketing and branding and building brand is a waste of money. I think that's the biggest mistake that particularly SMEs are making. So as a result, what they end up doing is that they do not invest in their brand, or in their brands rather. And we all know that if you don't invest on anything really, you don't put in the time, you don't put in the resources, we know the outcome won't be as great. So if you look at the brands that really do well, and you also look at their marketing budget, it really shows that actually these people are taking their brands seriously.
Yeah, let's talk about a definition of branding and how one explains that in the simplest of forms.
I mean, branding, in my view, and how I'd like to define it, is that it's an ever-ending process of building a reputation for your brand. For your business. So it includes all the marketing activities, all the branding elements, whether it's visual, it's audio, how your brands show up, how your brand shows up in the market. That is an exercise of branding. And some people think building a brand also is just a logo, or a brand is just a logo. It's way more than that. It's the promise that you make to your customers, and ultimately you need to keep that promise. So at the end of the day, if you are building a brand, think about how you show up in the market. For example, your brand identity, your brand name, that also counts. Some people, obviously, we like to keep to sometimes our African roots, but yet again, you want to service other markets. When you end up coming up with brand names that are too long, or brand names that are hard to pronounce, and that obviously that your customers won't be able to remember your brand name.
Your brand easily. All right, let's go through the masterclass. You have prepared about 6 slides for us and 6 very important parts about how one goes through this. You first say that one needs to have a unique brand identity. I can imagine that this is important in the sense that if you look like the next business, then there is no way one can differentiate between the two, and you can always be mistaken. Please build on this.
So having a unique brand identity obviously would mean that you stand out in the market. For example, think of it this way. If you walk into a retail shop and as you're walking through the aisle, say for example, soft drinks, you realize that there's many brands and they're all sort of using similar colors, they're copying each other, they're using similar fonts.
Yeah.
So what would make a brand stand out, for example? So things like color, things like the name, the font. So the entire visual brand identity needs to stand out. Mm-hmm. For example, there are some brands that before you even see the logo, before you start even seeing the brand name, but by just reading the font, you can tell that this is brand X. Without having seen any other cue, but just reading the font. Yeah. That speaks to the visual identity and the uniqueness of that particular brand.
Understood.
So
you may continue.
Oh yes. So what that would mean for your brand is that people will easily remember it. Earlier on, I gave an example of just having a long, complicated name that is difficult to remember. It poses a challenge for a brand. So always, when you think about branding, think simplicity. How do we stand out in the market in the most simplest way, so that consumers don't have to work sort of hard or apply themselves too much before they think of us.
Right.
I can name a couple of brands that, for example, if you look at the color yellow and you look at the telecommunications industry, automatically you think MTN. If you look at the swoosh, which is Nike's logo, without even thinking hard, you definitely
associated with it.
Yes, it's Nando's.
Right.
Then you also look at Nike. And if you look at a brand like Nando's, the font on its own, it's just so unique that you can't associate it with any other brand.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I speak about in terms of building
a brand identity.
A strong and unique brand identity.
Right. Let's move along. Tell a story. What story is this that one needs to tell through their business or through their brand?
So storytelling is very important when you are building a brand. People will always remember stories than hard facts and figures and statistical numbers. Remember, also stories are emotive. And also I'll keep on mentioning this brand as if I'm their brand ambassador. But if you look at a brand like Nike, has been so consistent in their storytelling that they've been able to win so many hearts. So building a brand, you need to tell your own story. And bringing it home as well. If you look at the likes of Batu, if you look at the likes of Drip, and I look at the founders of those brands, Biobaloi and Legao, they very much great storytellers. They're always telling their stories and they're telling it so diligently as well as consistently.
Yeah.
We don't have to copy the story of starting in a back room in Alexander. You can always, every brand has a unique story. And that's the beauty of it, that you can't copy the Amazon story, for example. No other brand can say, okay, we started.
Yeah. The story remains unique to them. So I'd want us to rush through the next kind of points for the interest of time. You also you talk about leveraging of PR, especially because people confuse PR with marketing. Why is it important to leverage of PR? And also while you are at that, perhaps bring in the next point of when you say every touch point matters, explain to us what that point means.
So PR builds on the storytelling part, because obviously for people to know about your brand, you sort of need platforms where you can tell your story. We all know that media, for example, they're always in need of unique content, unique stories. Therefore, if your brand story is unique enough in a way that we can position it to the media and get some coverage. So the reason why PR is so important when you're starting out is that PR is what we call earned media, meaning that you don't have to pay to get featured on SME on Point, for example,
right.
Or you don't have to get paid to be on the cover of a magazine, or your story to be told on a particular magazine, which is the greatest benefit for many small businesses, given the fact that they don't have big marketing budgets that they can spend on TV ads, radio ads, and out-of-home advertising. So it's very imperative that you leverage off PR. Once you've crafted your story and your story is solid enough, you can then take it to various media houses for them to tell it. But another thing that's important about PR is the fact that it helps in terms of building reputation for your brand. Many a times, once we've seen your story or a particular brand story on TV or read about it in the media, the credibility of that brand becomes more solid.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, and taking it to the next point in terms of every touch point matters.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are living in an era where obviously digital platforms are put on a pedestal, but in reality, when you're building a brand, it doesn't matter which platforms to use, because at the end of the day, where there are eyeballs, where people can see your brand, that's what matters. So TV, radio, digital, social media, out of home, events, activations, all those touch points are important, when you are building a brand. So you need to maximize on that. I know digital marketing, for example, is one of the most efficient ways of putting your brand out there, but it's not the only platform that you should consider if you want to build a reputable brand. So I want to see it on social media, but also when I walk out of my house, I want to see it on billboard, or I want to see it or hear about it on radio and on TV.
It must basically be in your face. It must basically be in your face. And while you are at that, our last point on being consistent, Pat, it's important to remain consistent. Last week's masterclass also put that to the fore about the importance of consistency. You cannot post today, you cannot do things today, but tomorrow you're not doing them. We're not sure when we're going to hear about your brand again. So in just a few seconds before I let you go, Pat, on this masterclass, please take us through consistency.
Consistency is the key of any success of any brand. It's important. I gave an example of Nando's, which you can easily identify without even having seen the logo or having heard about the brand being mentioned, because that particular font that they're using, they use it consistently throughout. And the same thing goes, like, for example, on social media. Like you said, you can't post today, then the next week we are off, or, people are now not sure whether you are coming or going. So consistency becomes very, very important when you are building a brand. And I just want to also touch on this point, the last point, in terms of investing in your brand. You need to, whatever money you generate, through sales or whatever other put it back into the business, especially if you are in it for the long run. Building a brand is not a sprint; it's a marathon. It's a consistent activity a consistent.
Yeah, Pat, thank you so much. Yeah, Pat, thank you so much. I'm sure that we will be having you on our Instagram page in the next week to further do this masterclass for those who have missed it. I know that there's a lot of people that had an interest in it, but Pat Mahlangu is the founder of Pat on Brands. He was taking us through a masterclass on how to build a reputable brand for your small business.